Vitalik's back on Bankless, we've officially defined the metaverse, and what do you do when your friend asks you about crypto? All this and more on... I'm Luke, and this is TLDR, where we catch you up on all the important narratives and big headlines from around Bankless this week. As always, there are going to be links down in the show notes so you can do a deeper dive into any of these topics. So before we start, I want to quickly shout out our sponsor, TracerDAO. Their Perpetual Pools product is now live on Aribtrum. Launching natively to Layer 2 is something we've talked a lot about. Skipping Ethereum mainnet and going straight to a rollup makes a lot of sense for a derivatives protocol like Tracer. And now we have scaled, decentralized leverage with no liquidity and no margins. Pretty cool. Check it out at tracer.finance. So Vitalik came on the podcast this week, which is always a good time, and he recently posted an article to his blog called Moving Beyond Coin Voting Governance. And for DeFi protocols, coin voting seems to be the standard mechanism for governance, but there are inherent flaws here. In an optimal governance structure, the incentives of the individual are aligned with those of the whole. The interests of the individual are typically profit-driven or self-interest, while the interests of the whole include public goods, general well-being, maintenance, upgrades, the health of the whole ecosystem. And it's really hard to take those two things and smush them together in an elegant way. Governance is how you decide things, how you decide where capital and resources should go. Do you give every individual involved the exact same weight? Do you prioritize those who may have more at stake? What about participation? How can you ensure that each person only gets one identity? These are tough questions that require research, development, and elegant implementation. Coin voting as it currently stands doesn't really do the trick. Whales can coordinate and overpower smaller stakeholders, and in general, coin voting promotes the interest of the coin holders. And a DeFi ecosystem is, and should be, much more than just its token.
The thing that coin voting really relies on for kind of the philosophical arguments for why it makes sense is this idea that it couples economic interests and governance power, right? Like coin voting governance is supposed to work because the people with the coins have the votes. And so the people who have economic interest in the protocol's success are the ones that have the governance power to make the success happen. The problem is that financialization is extremely good at separating out different parts of an asset if the people in that asset want them to be separated. And most people, because each individual person only has such a tiny and insignificant share of the governance power, most people do not value their governance power that highly, right? Even if there aren't any attackers, it's very hard to get people to be willing to vote at all. Voter participation rates in most coin voting systems are tiny. And then if there is the ability to just kind of split up your token that has the economic interest and the governance power and say there's going to be token A that has just the economic interest and token B that has just the governance power, and then you can go rent out your token B and keep your token A, that's a deal that a lot of people are going to find attractive, right? And financial systems are just inherently about doing this kind of unbundling.
Long story short, it makes sense why coin voting is the default standard, but we can and should do better. The podcast covers a bunch of other things like running your own node, other layer ones like Solana and the trade-offs there, and the metaverse. I love when Vitalik comes on Bankless, and I strongly recommend going through all his episodes. In Market Monday, David talked about how the pace of innovation in this industry is astounding, and it's really not all that surprising when you think about it. The crypto community lives on the cutting edge of coordination technologies, and one piece of innovation drives another, and it's expanding in complex ways in all sorts of directions, and this is discussed in way further detail in the upcoming Layer 0 episode with Kevin Owocki of Gitcoin, and it's a good one. In this week's Layer 0, though, David spoke with probably our favorite Bitcoiner, Nic Carter. And what I really respect about Nick is his priorities are always in line, and he absolutely crushes what the Bitcoin community is the best at, and that is macro, big picture, history, economics. And just like Bitcoin, Nic's values are hard, clean-cut, and reliable. And there was also a really interesting conversation here about religion. What role does faith play in the different arenas of crypto culture? How do belief systems and identities come into play as you find your place in this industry? Now, I don't mean this in a Democrat, Republican kind of way, but it definitely seems like the Bitcoin ethos would attract more conservative-minded, faith-based folks, while Ethereum and DeFi is a little more liberal-minded. And as I've gotten to know the space more, the reasons behind this distinction are increasingly clear, even on the deep technical protocol level. And as the human layer, layer 0, smashes together and mingles with the technology layer, I think that's when you have the metaverse. It seems like everybody in the space is trying to wrap their heads around exactly what the metaverse is. And instead of our usual live stream, this week Ryan and David did a classic no guest episode to define the metaverse.
Humanity is going digital. People like to own things. People are going to want to own digital things. Mm-hmm. That's crypto in a nutshell. And if you believe that's true, then like crypto's got to have a bright future. And I think the metaverse sort of fits into that, because what we're doing in crypto is sort of like, I guess the metaverse is hard to define. Maybe we'll get into some definition of it. But what we're doing in crypto is we're layering kind of this object permanence on top of it, this digital property rights system.
Once we have digital objects and objects that exist only on the internet, then it's up to the internet and the things that we do on it to build a world around those objects, because we're not going to build a physical world around those objects. We already have a physical world with physical objects. Now we have digital objects, but what we are missing is a digital world. But I think this whole digital world, of which people have started to call the metaverse, begins with a base of digital objects. And so the fundamental thesis about this whole idea is that the metaverse emerges out of a shared registry, a shared state of truth, a single source of truth of all known objects in the digital universe, or the metaverse. So that's like kind of the skeleton for the whole entire thesis.
The conversation circles around much of David's article from a few weeks back called The Metaverse Emerges. And it's really hard to put all of the ideas in a nutshell, but the TLDR is that something like a crypto-economic nation state is emerging, slowly spreading out its feelers and rooting itself into the fabric of our society. And in this space, the metaverse will exist, and it already exists in many ways, and it definitely exists to a degree on the current internet. But the fully fledged metaverse is what we're trying to get at here, and it's tough to pin down. I think what we'll see is something like Raoul Pal said, digital fluidity. When the internet reaches a space where value and information are manifested into composable objects, and sovereign individuals have ownership over those objects.
And when the metaverse has tens of thousands, hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions of objects floating around in the metaverse, that each one has its own serial number because each one had to be like manifested in Ethereum by a transaction. But now every time an object collides with another object, that is also another transaction on Ethereum. It's likely going to be on a roll-up. That's what roll-ups are for. But like all of this economic activity, this vibrancy of objects interacting with objects creates an economic engine. It is the heat of the economy. And then EIP 1559 captures a portion of that heat to recycle it into the Ethereum economy to make sure it's secure, make sure it's going, make sure the engine is fluid. And that is the model of the metaverse. And that is, in my mind, really, really bullish.
Identities, cultures, social things, economic things, all blended together in an immersive, cohesive way. And the glue of that metaverse is the subjective human people side of things, and also the objective, hard-coded protocol on the other. Is that thing Ethereum? Is ETH ultrasound metaverse money? Anyways, part of marrying those two things together, the digitally social with the digitally economic, is onboarding people into this space. And perhaps the most challenging part of this whole thing is bridging the crypto curious into the crypto native. That's what Ben talks about in his article this week, and he tells us how he onboards his friends into crypto. This world is a deep, multifaceted one, which is not easy to understand, especially at first. On top of that, the media stigma and cultural understanding of crypto is generally misleading and distracting. So how do you onboard people into this space? Well, you find their motivations. What are their interests or concerns about crypto? Then, where do they get their information? Crypto Twitter is a squishy, chaotic place where you can either find tons of insight or tons of BS. Showing people where to look is huge to get them to familiarize themselves with the language and the culture. And finally, at some point, they need skin in the game. They need to get themselves some assets, first to know what it feels like, but also as an incentive to figure out exactly what's going on. From there, they can onboard into DeFi, use a decentralized application, and eventually participate in the ecosystem. ecosystem, find their niche, find what they like and care about. Our other articles this week focused on the using a decentralized application part. First, we covered lending with Maple Finance. Maple is a really interesting DeFi primitive concerned with under-collateralized corporate loans. Maple is paving the way for DeFi credit, where the vast majority of crypto is either fully or over-collateralized. Credit scores are tricky, but Maple has stepped into the arena of offering loans to verified, creditworthy institutions on the borrowing side. And on the lending side, you can stake funds to earn yield. We also covered earning on dYdX, one of DeFi's biggest perpetuals markets. dYdX rewards traders with its native token, offers yield on staking liquidity, and also offers discounts on trading fees to token holders. These are two of many, many dApps out there to learn more about and start getting your hands dirty. So with that, get your hands dirty with some of our sponsors, Aribtrum, MATCHA, Ledger, and UNISWAP. We get to sponsor some of the essential tools to onboard your friends into DeFi. So when your friends ask what they should try, well, the Bankless sponsors are a pretty good place to start. Also, this video wouldn't be possible without them, so thanks a lot. And finally, none of this is financial advice. ETH is risky, DeFi is risky, but we are headed west. It's the frontier. It's not for everyone, but we are glad you are with us on the Bankless journey. See you next time.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, head over to Bankless HQ right now to develop your crypto investing skills and learn how to free yourself from banks and gain your financial independence. We recommend joining our daily newsletter, podcast, and community as a Bankless Premium subscriber to get the most out of your Bankless experience. You'll get access to our market analysis, our alpha leaks, and exclusive content, and even the Bankless token for airdrops, raffles, and unlocks. If you're interested in crypto, the Bankless community is where you want to be. Click the link in the description to become a Bankless Premium subscriber today. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for in-depth interviews with industry leaders, Ask Me Anythings, and weekly roll-ups where we summarize the week in crypto and other fantastic content. Thanks everyone for watching and being on the journey as we build out the Bankless Nation.